some water. All right. Let's give it a second. And all right. So from next talk, I'm going to be going over the new Exchange Online v2 commandlets and comparing them versus the older Exchange Online version 1 commandlets. So for this agenda, we'll be going through, what is the Exchange Online PowerShell module? We'll quickly go through that at a high level. And then we'll kind of compare what are some of the key differences between Exchange Online v2 and Exchange Online v1. Then we'll quickly go through how to install the module and how to connect to Exchange Online. And then we'll do, at the end, we'll have a runtime comparison of get-mailbox, the Exchange Online v1 command versus get-exo mailbox, which is the version 2 command. So after this, hopefully everyone will understand what Exchange Online is and the PowerShell module. What are the key differences? So what are the improvements that were made in Exchange Online v2 and what's different from v1? And then finally, we'll hopefully be able to understand how to install the Exchange Online v2 module and how to connect to Exchange Online with the new method. So what is the Exchange Online PowerShell module? It is Exchange Online, obviously, is a part of the Office 365 suite. It gives users access to email, calendar, contacts, and stuff like that. And the Exchange Online PowerShell module is the administrative interface that administrators can use to, manage your tenant. You can manage mailboxes, other things like that, mailboxes, forwarding rules, the whole 9 yards. You can do it pretty much entirely through PowerShell. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the newer v2 commands actually use a REST API, I believe. So, yeah. So let's quickly go through, how to install the Exchange Online v2 module and connect to Exchange Online. This is a bit different from the way that version 1 functions. We'll go over that later, but this is how you do it for the newer updated Exchange Online v2 module. So all you have to do basically is run the command in any window, install module, and then just specify Exchange Online management. And then once you do that, you can run connect-exchange online. And this window will pop up, and this will force modern authentication. In Exchange Online v2, you actually cannot use basic authentication. You cannot use basic authentication. It will natively force you to use modern auth. So the primary difference between Exchange Online v1 and Exchange Online v2 is property sets. So with the Exchange Online v1 commandlets, specifically get-mailbox, get-mailbox will pull about upwards of 200 attributes, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but it's pulling all available properties that it can on an object. So that's what the v1 commands are doing. In Exchange v2, they actually parse them out into property sets, which are just arrays of attributes. And so by default, Exchange Online v2, if you run the same command, get-exo mailbox, which is the v2 command, you can specify which properties you want to pull so that you don't have to pull all available information, because otherwise you're just pulling information that isn't useful to you. So like there's oftentimes just a lot of blank attributes too, but that's still an attribute that you're going to have to store and iterate over. So this is the main reason why v2 was touted as a lot faster than v1. The old degraded v1 commands is because property sets enabled it to be significantly faster. And you can also specify which properties you want to pull, which is why you would probably see some performance increases if you specified less property sets than normal. And so also additionally, on top of property sets, there's a new way to connect to Exchange Online. I demonstrated the new Exchange Online V2 way earlier, but with V1, you have to actually go, if in order to use modern authentication or MFA with V1, you have to go into your Exchange Admin Center. You have to go to the hybrid setup, to click download on a file. Then you have to install the file, and then you have to import the module, and then you have to authenticate. It takes way too long, and you also have to navigate to which directory the script is in, whereas in V2, you can just type connect-exchange online after you've installed the module, and it'll run from anywhere. This is probably the biggest key difference for me, at least. When I was running Get-Mailbox and doing a ton of operations on the mailbox, I started running into one of the most fun thing in the entire world, which are Microsoft Throttles or Exchange Online Throttles. So when you run a command against the Exchange server, since it's on the server side, it's doing most of the work on the server side itself. Sometimes Exchange will throw what are called micro-throttles. Micro-throttles are basically just saying, Microsoft saying, hey, you're using way too many resources right now. You're slowing down everything. You get a throttle and you can't execute any commands for the next however long the timer is. The catch here is if you do run a command during that time, it'll actually double the timer for the throttle, which can be extremely annoying. And sometimes these get thrown at random times. I mean, it's never at the same exact time. They're super annoying, and they're just, they're the worst. Throttling, Microsoft Exchange Online throttling is the worst because it basically doesn't allow you to manage anything on Exchange Online for a set period of time. So this is where the version 2 Exchange Online commands come in, because they're already not pulling as much data as Get-Mailbox, which makes them much less likely to be thrown a throttle, just because they're not using as many resources as the V1 commandlets. Here's a little infographic of what happens when you run Get-Mailbox on a tenant with over 5,000 mailboxes. Lots of micro throttles. You would micro throttle like every 15 minutes or so. So I was actually interested. So Microsoft on their website claims that Exchange Online V2 is up to 4 times as fast as the V1 module. So I couldn't actually find any speed tests or runs, anyone comparing the two commands against each other. So I kind of wanted to do something with this. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is how much faster is it, and is it worth actually upgrading or using this new module? And so there's some key assumptions here. First off, I ran this on a tenant with 1,200 mailboxes. This is 20 runs. However, I sorted the runtimes from lowest to highest, just kind of display the I didn't want to have a data point that was 17.3 and, have another one that was way lower. But basically, as you can tell from this graph, it's about 5 seconds. It's about 5 seconds. The average, let's see. Okay. Ooh, okay. But yeah, as you can see, it's about a 5 second difference, but this is kind of assumed, right? Because since they're already pulling less data, you can assume that it's going to be a little bit faster. And especially if you're doing a lot of operations on these objects, having less data to iterate over and actually do operations on is going to make the program faster. So even when it's faster not only on the server side, but also on the client side, because you won't run into throttles and stuff like that. But also on the client side, because you won't have to iterate over as many attributes or have to pull that information about it. So why should you actually go out and try and install this? What's stopping you from just using the V1 module and just continuing, using it however you may use it? So the first reason that I like is it's a much simpler process just for installation and connecting, especially if you're using MFA. MFA is going to be the new standard as of, I mean, not MFA, sorry, modern authentication is going to be forced on a lot of email connection platforms. So like remote PowerShell and stuff like that, they're disabling legacy authentication. So you basically will not be able to use basic authentication with the V1 module to connect to Exchange Online. So you will have to use modern authentication. And since you have to use modern authentication, it would make sense, to use Exchange Online V2 since it's natively modern auth and it's not as complex of a process to install it or use it. Probably the biggest thing is obviously we talked about micro throttles. Using the V2 module will make your commands or your script much less likely to run into any micro throttles, which can be a huge pain to deal with, especially when you're running large scripts and you need to get something done. And then, as I said before, the V2 module forces modern authentication. So, I mean, if you want to wait until October 13th, 2020 to upgrade to V2, you can. But if you want to have faster scripts, have more accurate data and also avoid, getting stopped in the middle of your script and having to restart it. That's the main reason that upgrading to EXO V2 is worth it. But if you do want to upgrade and you choose to do so, don't worry. The Exchange Online V2 is actually if you authenticate with Exchange Online V2, you can still use the V1 commands. They aren't going to be depreciated as of yet. So if you have any existing code that uses the older V1 commands, they'll still work because you're still authenticating to Exchange. But some V1 commands are not Exchange Online. V1 commands are not in Exchange Online V2, but I'll post a link for not only what properties are in the property set, so you can actually see what data is being pulled. And I'll also post a link kind of just referencing what commands are actually included in the newer commandlet. All right. And so we went over, what is Exchange Online? What is it used for? It's used for Office 365 administration and managing your Exchange Online organization. We went over some of the differences between Exchange Online V2 and Exchange Online V1. And we also kind of went over how to install the module and then how to connect to Exchange Online. And then finally, we went through how is this thing comparing? Is it worth it to run it? Is it really that much faster? And clearly from the graph, it was about 5 seconds faster on the lowest times. There was a clear gap between EXO V2 and EXO V1. So hopefully after this, you'll understand, what Exchange Online actually is and what are some of the key differences between Exchange Online V1 and Exchange Online V2. And then after this, hopefully you'll be able to understand how to actually install the module itself and connect to Exchange Online.
Thank you, Danny. Awesome. So I think we only have one question from Monterey. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Are there any issues with hybrid Exchange environments?
I'm sorry, what was that again? Can you repeat that? That's in the chat.
Are there any issues with hybrid Exchange environments?
It depends on what your hybrid Exchange environment. I mean, I haven't on the tenant I was actually running these commands on. They are hybrid tenants, so I didn't run into anything from when I was running the commands themselves, but it could be different per case. I'm not quite sure if it fits whatever case you have.
Oh, looks like Frank hadn't answered that question. I can read that out loud. Frank said, not that I'm aware of. Keep in mind that Exchange Online Management module is used to connect to Exchange Online, not your hybrid self-hosted server.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's
Cool.
right.
All right, any other questions?
Amanda, there's one from Andrew Johnson.
Oh, have you used either V1 or V2 in conjunction with robust cloud command to work through the micro throttles?
I'm not. I just pulled up that code on GitHub, but if it's
Yeah.
something that can avoid micro throttles, I'm definitely interested.
I've looked at this a little bit. I've not used it though. My approach has been to do like a back off when I hit a throttle. So I'm not totally answering the question, but that code does look promising.
Yeah, and in reference to Frank's point, when you do encounter like a micro throttle and then you can back off, it's still you backing off, you know? So hopefully with like the Exchange Online V2 commands, you won't have to ever encounter them or back off, which will further, speed up your script.
The one thing though, Danny, I mean, this is a little bit off topic because it's not really throttling technically, but as many folks on this call know, Exchange sometimes like just doesn't do what you told it to do. Meaning like it'll accept the command, it won't throw an error, it will not throttle you explicitly, it won't tell you you're being throttled, but it just doesn't do what you asked it to do. And so I don't know if that's some weird form of throttling or some kind of gray area like command failure. But
Yeah.
being able to detect and react to that is important if you're trying to write something that's mission critical.
Yeah.
So it's almost like do the thing you're trying to do, check the thing you thought you did, right? Which slows things down further, unfortunately.
True.
All right, I don't think I have any other questions in here, but just a quick request. If you have a question directly for the presenter, could you send it privately to me just so I can distinguish what's a question versus a conversation? That would be very helpful.
And I believe Ryan Kellerman, are you up next? I believe I can pass control over.